Dr. James Chalmers was a missionary to the South Sea Islands back in the early part of the 20th century. One time on one of his missionary journeys, he went to live with a tribe that was cannibalistic. And when he went to live with them, he knew their language, and so he got in conversation with the chief, and he told the chief the story of Jesus of Nazareth. He talked to him very straight, and the chief wouldn't listen to his story. He couldn't buy it. But Chalmers hadn't noticed that behind him was one of his boys. He was a great big strapping giant of a man. And one night he came to see Chalmers in his tent, and he asked Chalmers some very penetrating questions about his faith. And Chalmers was amazed at his deep understanding of life. And so they talked together, and so he had to stay at the tribe because they were holding him as a virtual prisoner. And he was there for several weeks when one night the drums started to beat, and they started to drink. The tribesmen started to drink, and they started to chant, and they were going to have a feast. They were going to eat Mr. Chalmers for dinner. And Mr. Chalmers was worried and concerned, and so he went to see the chief, and the chief called him out into the group, and he told him that where was his God today? Where was he? If his God would come and deliver him, he'd believe in his God. And he was waiting for that to happen, and everybody was laughing. They were chortling, all of the tribesmen. They were having a great time in their drunkenness. And about that time, there stepped out into the middle of the circle that big strapling son of the chief. And he stood out in the circle, and he had in his hand a sword that somebody had got off a pirate ship. And he had it in his hand, and he laid the point of it down on the ground, and he looked at the crowd, and he said, Mr. Chalmers' God was busy, and so he sent me to be his substitute, and I'm here to defend him. And if any of you want to step up, just step up. And they all stood back, and they were quiet. And after a time, the old chief stood up, and he walked toward his son. And his son laid the sword down again with the point on the ground, and he said, 2 steps, no farther. And the father stopped. And as he stopped, a great sense of admiration, a look of admiration came over his face. And he looked at his son, and then he turned to the tribesmen, and he said, Sirs, I want to announce to you that I'm abrogating my throne, and my son is now going to be chief. And whatever my son says, that's what we'll do, because my son has proven that he has inside him the kind of valor that can turn people around. And Mr. Chalmers said that he was saved, and he said he couldn't believe it, that he had been saved, that somehow or other in the process of faith he had been saved from being eaten alive. And you know, for all of us, if we had that kind of encounter, I guess our faith might really begin to grow. It would sure grow for me. Otherwise I'd probably be sweet meat for somebody, for one of those cannibal guys. But anyway, in this case, God, somehow this man was delivered. And I choose to think that maybe the good Lord had something to do with it, and that he has that kind of ability for all of us. If we would trust him in the midst of our difficulties, when the trials come, if we'd be there and let him help us, we might be surprised at what we receive. I've heard, and I know a lot of men and women who've experienced that kind of life as they've grown old. And I'm trusting that God will give me the courage and the strength to do likewise. And I'm praying that the same will happen for you. May the good Lord bless you today.